In this video I'll be salvaging and milling some timber from some hardwood doors and windows and preparing them for my next project, which I'll talk about later in the video. The first door I have to work with is this one we removed from our shower room, which I replaced a few months back by fitting this one, which is more in keeping with the look that we wanted in the room. And the frame of this door is made up of laminated strips of hardwood with a face veneer on each side, and the panels in the middle are veneered MDF. The second door came from our entrance hall, which we replaced with this one, and this glazed door is the best of the three doors in terms of salvaging wood, as it's solid hardwood, no laminations or veneers. I'm being very careful here to keep my circular saw blade well away from the glass. You do need to be cautious making these kind of cuts. The third door I have is our old front door, and this was probably the worst of the three. It was still hardwood, but lots and lots of laminations and not great quality wood either, and also a bit of rot and woodworm too. I'm removing the metal hardware, cutting the usable timber away, and finally I can work on removing the glazed panels, which I will take away for recycling. These solid brass hinges I'll keep too, and they'll get reused. They'll clean up nicely with a bit of sanding and polishing. And these veneered MDF panels from the first door I'll also find a use for at some point in future. So this is the pile of wood salvage from the doors, and over to the left these bits will be used as firewood. Doors in particular are a great source of wood if you can get hold of them, and even though I was lucky to have a few I could salvage from my new home, it's always worth checking places like Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, or whatever classified ad sites you use to see what you can find, as you can usually pick them up pretty cheap, sometimes even free, and you'd have to pay a considerable amount of money if you wanted to buy this amount of hardwood from a timber merchant, so it really is worth the effort. Later on I'll be salvaging some more wood from some window frames too, but first I'm going to start milling up what I've salvaged so far so that I can figure out if I have enough good wood here to work with for the project I have in mind. Before I mill up what I have here though, I'm going to spend some time looking at each piece to see if there are any brad nails or screws or anything metal, as I don't want to ruin the blades on any of my machines. Having said that, I'd already actually cut through a few brad nails with my circular saw blade, as you can see here, but I only ever use my circular saw for rough cuts anyway, and actually these carbide tip blades tend to cope pretty well with cutting through thin brad nails, so even though I try and avoid cutting them, I don't worry about it too much. The pieces where I can't see any traces of metal get put in a separate pile as they're ready to run through my machines. It's always worth running a magnet over them too, as sometimes you can pick up traces of metal that aren't always visible. For the ones with nails, I can denail with my pincers. And once everything is clean, I run each piece through the table saw to clean up the edges. These shorter pieces of the door frame still have the joints on them, so I'm going to cut those off at the miter saw. And you'll see here that there were some dowels inside used for the original joinery, but I can still find a use for these bits. Some of the staved pieces of hardwood were finger jointed too, so I cut away those bits where possible. With these longer pieces, I found roughly the centre by weight using my hand, and then I can offer it up to the blade and cut them into two pieces, as I know that I'm not going to need any longer lengths for the project I had in mind. And that project is a rocking chair, which I'm building for Karl Woodcraft's Build a Chair Challenge on the 5th of December. So do check out all of the participants' videos for that, as I expect there'll be some really interesting ones. I've written a rough cut list here for my project, which I can use for my timber selection, and there are a few things here going through my mind. One, I need to find pieces that are big enough in size. Two, I want to figure out where I want to cut those pieces to avoid as many of the imperfections in the wood as possible, like the dowel ends and the finger joints, that kind of stuff. And three, I want the nicest pieces of timber to be the most visible ones on the chair. So for example, I want the legs and the arms of the chair and the front apron rails to be the nicer, cleaner looking pieces, but I'm less worried about the back apron rails and the seat support rails. Out of all of the salvaged wood, this is probably the most hodgepodge piece of timber. You can see it's made up of at least 18 bits laminated together here. Next, I want to get all of the pieces to a consistent thickness. Some of these were around 45mm, some 40mm, and some 35mm. So I set up my thicknesser and start to run the faces of each board through. For one of the boards that had veneers on each face, I'm actually just going to remove a very small amount from one of the veneers to remove the old finish and actually retain that veneer, as it's going to hide the laminations that are underneath. And I can face those towards the inside of the chair, that way no one will ever know that it's not a solid piece of timber. So I remove all of the thickness from the opposite face to get it down to the thickness needed. And here's one of the nicer pieces of timber, which is one nice solid piece with no laminations. So that went mostly well. I've got some lovely pieces of timber here that I can use. Apart from these two pieces, which not only are a bit of a hodgepodge of random scraps of wood, but also I've noticed a few traces of woodworm damage. So I'd rather not use these just in case. I could treat them, but I don't have any woodworm treatment in the workshop at the moment. So I'm going to put these on the burn pile and find some more wood to use instead. So as I mentioned earlier, I have an old window frame here and a window sill too. These both came out of our old kitchen before we renovated it. There's a video about removing that window on my channel, and also an exclusive video about the kitchen renovation, which is available via Patreon or YouTube channel membership. And there are some really good chunks of usable timber in here too. First, I can cut away the bits I want to work with using the circular saw. And then I can run them through the thicknesser. These pieces were so nice that I decided to use them for the arms of the chair. So at this point I had selected all of the pieces I needed to make the chair, with one exception: the rollers of the rocking chair, or the rockers, I'm not sure what you call them. For those I needed more thickness, and I thought about laminating some pieces together, and then I remembered that I had this very warped piece of timber which was really chunky, so I ripped that in half at the table saw by making multiple passes and raising the blade in between cuts. But I couldn't quite cut through it all, so I finished the cut at the bandsaw. And I can then work on squaring up the faces and edges at the planer. And at this point I've got everything I need to get started with the project. This video is a bit different to the videos I normally make, but I thought it'd be interesting to focus in on the salvaging and milling side of things just for once in a bit more detail, as it does take a fair bit of time and it's a significant part of each and every project, but usually I kind of brush over that part in my build videos and get straight into the cutting and assembly. But yeah, anyway, my next video will be about making the rocking chair. There'll be a link to that in the description box below as soon as it's available. That's it for this one. I hope you found this video useful. Please subscribe for more weekly woodworking videos. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can do that via Patreon or YouTube channel membership, where you can get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free project plans and cut lists, and a name credit at the end of my videos. Or alternatively, you can make a one-off donation via PayPal. Thank you for watching.